They expected the alien princess to run, but she chose war instead. The people of the realm had thought this day would never come, that their princess would hide, that she would flee to the safety of the royal vaults. Yet, as the first warships of the Korathian armada descended from the clouds, the alien princess, Elira Varian, stood tall upon the highest balcony of the fortress palace, her golden hair catching the last rays of the sun. Elira's eyes, a striking shade of violet, scanned the horizon. Her heart did not pound in fear. Instead, it thrummed with determination. The generals whispered in anxious tones behind her, expecting her to issue commands to evacuate or surrender, but she did not falter. She had been trained in diplomacy, in grace, in ways to avoid bloodshed. But today, diplomacy had failed. Today, she would lead. The first Korathian ship landed in the valley below. Its hull was black and jagged, adorned with spiked insignias that glowed ominously. Elira's advisors murmured about their firepower, the thousands of soldiers that would pour forth. "Princess, it is not safe," one of them warned, his voice trembling. "We must consider the council's advice. Evacuate now or the city will fall." Elira turned to him, her gaze steady and unyielding. "And leave my people to be slaughtered, to watch our homes burned and our streets drenched in blood." She shook her head, the words carrying the weight of command. "No, I will not hide while our world is taken from us. We fight, we survive, we endure." Her declaration echoed across the marble halls of the palace, and even the nervous guards straightened, inspired by her resolve. For years, Elira had been underestimated. Many had called her weak, the figurehead princess of a dying empire. But strength was not always shown in bowing or fleeing. Sometimes it was shown in defiance. And Elira was ready to show the galaxy the strength of Varian. Below the palace, the city's defenders scrambled to organize. Elira moved among them, her presence alone raising morale. She had trained with the warriors since she was young, learning the art of combat, the strategy of war, and the discipline required to command an army. Though her form was elegant and regal, her hands could wield a blade as fiercely as any soldier. Today, she would show them that the blood of Varian's line ran through her veins, and that it could not be broken. As the Korathians advanced, the first volleys of plasma fire lit up the valley. Explosions shook the ground, sending shards of metal and rock into the air. Civilians ran for shelter while soldiers returned fire from barricades. Elira moved to the edge of the battlefield, where her scouts had reported a breach in the outer defenses. The walls were strong, but not impenetrable. She would not sit idle while her people died waiting for reinforcements that might never come. "Form ranks," she commanded, her voice clear and sharp. Soldiers turned to her, recognizing the authority not of the crown alone, but of a leader who would stand beside them. Elira picked up a standard, the royal banner of Varian, and raised it high. The sight of their princess leading the charge ignited a courage that no drill or training could instill. Shouts of determination rang across the battlefield as the defenders advanced, pushing back against the invaders. The Korathian commander, a towering figure in black armor, watched from his ship. His eyes narrowed at the sight of Elira moving among the soldiers. "The girl is bold," he muttered, his voice tinged with annoyance. "Send in the elite battalion, crush her before she becomes a symbol." But Elira was ready. She had anticipated this, studying the Korathian tactics for months in secret. She had mapped their movements, trained her forces, and prepared traps along the valley floor. As the elite battalion charged, they were met with precise volleys of energy bolts and concealed mines that tore through their ranks. Screams filled the air as soldiers fell, and the momentum of the Korathians slowed. Amidst the chaos, Elira moved with uncanny grace, her combat training evident in every motion. She directed her forces with sharp commands, repositioning units, exploiting weaknesses, and maintaining morale even as the valley filled with fire and smoke. The citizens of Varian, who had expected their princess to flee, now witnessed her bravery firsthand. Fear was replaced by hope, despair by determination. By nightfall, the first wave of the Korathians had been pushed back. The city was scarred, buildings smoldering, streets littered with debris, but the people of Varian stood victorious, for now. Elira looked over the battlefield, her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of further attack. She knew this was only the beginning. The Korathians would return, stronger and more relentless, but so would she. She returned to the palace and convened with her advisors. Maps and hollow projections lit the room, showing the positions of both their forces and the enemy. "We have survived the first assault," Elira said, her tone steady but resolute. "But survival is not enough. We must strike, we must resist, and we must remind the galaxy that Varian does not bow. We are not weak. We are not victims. We are warriors." Her words, simple yet commanding, resonated with everyone in the room. Even the counselors, who had doubted her abilities, now looked upon her with newfound respect. Elira had not only survived the day, but had inspired her people to believe in something greater. The idea that courage and leadership could turn the tide of a seemingly impossible war. As the twin moons rose over the horizon, casting a pale light across the ruined valley, Elira prepared for the next stage of the conflict. She knew that the Korathians would regroup, that their reinforcements were already on the way. But she also knew that she had lit a spark of resistance that could not be extinguished. For the first time, the galaxy saw not a princess who would flee, but a leader who would fight. And Elira Varian, the alien princess of a world under siege, had chosen war instead of surrender. And with that choice, everything had changed. The night air was heavy with the smell of smoke and scorched metal. Elira walked the walls of the palace, her violet eyes scanning the horizon. Fires from the first wave of the Korathian assault still burned in the city below, casting flickering shadows across the streets. Soldiers moved cautiously among the ruins, tending to the wounded and reinforcing barricades. Elira's mind raced. The first victory had been hard-won, but the Korathians were relentless. She knew they would return, stronger and more prepared, and she had to be ready. In the war room, Elira convened her top commanders and advisors. Hollow projections of the valley displayed the positions of both their forces and the enemy. "The Korathians will not stop at a single failure," she said, pointing at the map. "Their reinforcements are already on the move. We must anticipate their strategy and strike before they regroup." One of the senior generals, a grizzled veteran named Corvin, frowned. "Princess, their numbers far exceed ours. We cannot hope to win a prolonged conflict. Perhaps we should consider temporary retreat." Elira turned to him, her expression calm but firm. "And let our people be slaughtered while we hide behind walls." "No, General, retreat is not our way. We will fight, and we will make every victory count. Every battle will weaken them, and every day we hold will give Varian a chance to survive." Her words inspired more than just hope. They sparked determination. Even the youngest soldiers, still shaken from the first attack, felt a surge of courage. Elira was not a ruler who stayed in comfort while her people suffered. She was among them, leading them, thinking for them, fighting for them. That was a rare thing in the galaxy. The first hours of planning were filled with strategy. Elira suggested deploying a series of decoys along the main valley routes. These would draw in the Korathian forces and channel them into narrow passages where Varian's smaller but more agile army could strike effectively. She also ordered the construction of hidden energy barricades and shock traps, devices she had studied in secret during her training. Every move was calculated, every detail considered. By dawn, Elira's army was ready. Soldiers lined the streets and gates, their armor shining even in the dim morning light. Civilians, though frightened, had been evacuated to underground shelters, safe from the worst of the fighting. Elira moved among the troops, offering encouragement and checking preparations. "Remember," she said, gripping the hilt of her sword, "we are Varian. We do not falter and we do not fear. Hold your ground and we will show them the strength of our people." As the first signs of the enemy approached, a massive fleet of Korathian ships filled the sky, dark shapes against the rising sun. Elira's scouts reported that this was only the first wave. More reinforcements would arrive within hours. Yet she did not hesitate. She mounted her hoverbike, a sleek silver machine capable of high speeds and sudden maneuvers, and rode to the front lines, her presence alone rallying the troops. The battle began with a thunderous roar. Korathian energy cannons lit the valley, sending fire streaking toward the barricades. Elira's army responded with precision, activating traps and returning fire. Explosions tore through the enemy ranks, but the Korathians were disciplined, adjusting quickly to the ambushes. The air was thick with smoke, the ground shaking with the force of impact. Elira moved with purpose, directing her forces with sharp, clear commands. She leapt from barricade to barricade, assessing the battlefield and reallocating troops where needed. Soldiers followed her every instruction, their confidence growing as they saw their princess fearless in the chaos. Even the youngest warriors, barely out of training, found courage in her example. The Korathian commander, watching from his flagship, was growing impatient. "The girl is clever," he said to his officers, "but no strategy can save her from total annihilation. Send in the heavy units, crush her forces once and for all." Elira anticipated this. As the heavily armored Korathian units advanced, she activated a hidden line of energy barricades, channeling their movement into narrow paths where they were vulnerable. Mines hidden along the ground erupted under the advancing tanks, throwing soldiers and machines alike into disarray. Elira personally led a small strike team to flank the enemy, cutting off retreat and causing confusion in their ranks. Despite the chaos, she remained composed. Every decision was deliberate, every movement calculated. She was not just fighting for victory, she was teaching her people how to fight with strategy, with courage, with intelligence. She was proving that humanity, or in her case, her alien species' ingenuity, could stand against even the mightiest enemies. Hours passed, and the battle raged on. Elira's forces were smaller, yes, but they were disciplined, coordinated, and inspired by her leadership. The Korathians, confident in their superior numbers, found themselves unable to adapt to the clever tactics and traps set by the princess. Slowly but surely, the momentum began to shift. In the heat of the battle, Elira noticed a group of enemy soldiers trying to infiltrate the city from the rear. Without hesitation, she led a squad to intercept them. The skirmish was fierce. Energy bolts and plasma blades clashed in sparks of light. Elira's combat skills shone, her movements fluid and precise. She struck decisively, incapacitating the enemy soldiers while minimizing casualties among her own forces. When the fight ended, the city had survived another wave of attack. The Korathians retreated to regroup, but Elira knew this was temporary. More would come. She returned to the palace to assess the damage and tend to the wounded. Her advisors suggested reinforcing the defenses further, preparing for siege tactics. Elira listened but also reminded them that they must not only defend, they must plan for the moment when they could go on the offensive. That evening, Elira walked along the palace balcony again, gazing at the horizon. Fires still burned, but smoke no longer felt like despair. It was a symbol of survival, of resistance, of the unwillingness to bow to a superior force. Soldiers marched in the streets below, repairing barricades, setting traps, and preparing for the battles yet to come. Civilians cautiously emerged from shelters, their eyes reflecting hope. A young lieutenant approached Elira, bowing respectfully. "Princess, the people are asking if we can hold against the next wave. They look to you for guidance." Elira placed a hand on his shoulder. "We will hold because we must, but holding is only the beginning. Every day we survive is a day we gain strength. Every battle we fight teaches us something. And one day we will take back what is ours. We will make the Korathians regret underestimating Varian. Word of her courage and leadership spread quickly. Soldiers and civilians alike spoke of the princess who led from the front, who refused to hide while her people suffered. Stories of her bravery inspired even the farthest corners of the realm, uniting the citizens in a shared purpose. For the first time in generations, Varian felt more than hope. They felt invincible when led by Elira. But Elira knew that inspiration alone would not win the war. Intelligence reports indicated that the Korathians were not only sending more troops, but had allied mercenaries from neighboring star systems. The coming days would test the limits of her leadership, strategy, and courage. She spent hours studying maps, calculating enemy movement, and planning counterattacks. Every decision mattered. Every misstep could mean devastation. Late at night, Elira entered the training chambers, where a small group of elite soldiers practiced combat drills. She joined them, picking up a practice blade and moving through the exercises with precision. Sweat dripped from her brow, muscles burned, but her determination never wavered. These drills were not only for physical strength, they were for mental resilience. Every motion, every maneuver reinforced the discipline she expected her people to embody on the battlefield. When the session ended, the soldiers looked to her, admiration and respect shining in their eyes. Elira smiled faintly. "Remember, courage is not the absence of fear," she said softly. "Courage is acting even when fear is present. And today, we have proven that Varian can stand against the strongest of enemies." As dawn approached once again, Elira prepared for another day of war. She knew that the coming battles would push them to the edge, but she also knew that her people would not falter if she led them. She had chosen war instead of surrender, and with every passing hour, her resolve grew stronger. The Korathians might see an alien princess leading her forces, and they might expect fear. But Elira Varian had no fear, only the unyielding will to protect her people, and the unshakable belief that her people could rise above any enemy. And so, as the twin sons of Varian rose once more, the city stood ready. Its princess, its leader, its symbol of hope, prepared for the battles yet to come. For Elira, the war was not only about survival. It was about proving that courage, strategy, and leadership could triumph over even the mightiest foe. The Korathians would soon learn that the princess they expected to flee was instead preparing to lead a war that would echo across the galaxy. The sky over Varian had grown dark, filled with storm clouds and the ominous hum of approaching enemy ships. Elira stood on the palace balcony, her violet eyes scanning the horizon. The first wave of Korathian attacks had been repelled, but now a larger, more formidable fleet was arriving. This was the moment that would define her reign and the survival of her people. Her advisors and generals gathered around the large holographic table in the war room, displaying the enemy formations and troop movements. "Princess," Corvin said, his voice tight with worry, "these numbers are overwhelming. They've brought heavy artillery and air support. We cannot fight them head-on." Elira studied the projections carefully, her mind moving faster than any of her council could follow. "We will not fight them head-on," she said, her tone calm but commanding. "Instead, we will divide them, confuse them, and strike where they are weakest. Today, we fight not just with strength but with intelligence." The strategy was bold. Varian's forces would split into multiple units, each acting as if they were independent armies, drawing the Korathians into traps and ambushes. Elira herself would lead the main strike team into the Central Valley, using the terrain to their advantage. Her scouts had discovered narrow ravines, dense forests, and high cliffs, natural defenses that could turn the tide against a numerically superior foe. At dawn, the battle began. Elira mounted her hoverbike and rode to the front, her cape fluttering in the wind. Soldiers cheered as she passed. their morale soaring at the sight of their princess leading the charge. Explosions rocked the valley as Korathian artillery fired upon the barricades, but Elira's forces moved quickly, activating hidden energy fields and mines that slowed the enemy advance. The first Korathian units entered the narrow ravines, expecting an easy march. Instead, they were met with volleys of precise fire from Varian's archers and energy rifle squads, who had been strategically positioned on cliffs and ledges. Mines concealed in the ravine floor detonated under enemy vehicles, creating chaos in their ranks. Elira personally oversaw the operation, signaling units, redirecting troops, and ensuring maximum efficiency. The Korathian commander, observing from orbit, was growing frustrated. "The princess is clever, but even cleverness cannot overcome brute force," he said, sending more troops into the trap. Yet with every wave, Elira's forces adapted, using their knowledge of the terrain and quick thinking to outmaneuver the invaders. Elira's mind worked like a machine, calculating enemy movement, predicting their next steps, and adjusting her strategy in real time. Every decision mattered, every command was precise, and her soldiers responded instinctively to her leadership. She was not just a symbol, she was a tactical genius, combining courage with intellect in a way that inspired all who fought beside her. Hours passed, and the valley became a whirlwind of fire, smoke, and battle cries. Elira led a squad to flank the enemy's heavy artillery, a crucial point that could have turned the tide in the Korathians' favor. The soldiers followed her through the forest, moving silently and swiftly. When they reached the artillery positions, Elira signaled the attack. The strike was devastating. Explosions rocked the enemy lines, and the Korathians were forced to retreat under heavy losses. Amidst the chaos, Elira noticed a group of enemy soldiers attempting to infiltrate the city from the northern gate. Without hesitation, she led a rapid response team to intercept them. The skirmish was intense, energy bolts and plasma blades lighting up the night. Elira fought with skill and precision, her movements fluid, almost dance-like. She disabled enemy combatants without unnecessary aggression, ensuring her troops could secure the city without risking civilians. When the battle finally subsided, Varian had suffered damage, but the city remained intact. Elira's bold strategies had not only defended the realm, but had also inflicted significant losses on the enemy. Soldiers cheered, their morale stronger than ever, and even civilians dared to come out from hiding, inspired by the courage of their princess. Back in the palace, Elira convened with her commanders to plan the next phase. "This is only the beginning," she said. "The Korathians will not stop. We must be ready to strike again, to defend again, and to teach them that Varian does not surrender." Corvin nodded, respect evident in his voice. "Princess, your leadership has turned the tide. Our forces are inspired, our people united. You have proven that courage and intelligence can overcome even overwhelming odds." Elira allowed herself a brief smile. "We fight not for glory but for survival, for our people, for our world. And every battle we win strengthens us, teaches us, and prepares us for the ultimate confrontation." Her mind was already working on the next strategy. She considered the terrain, the enemy's weaknesses, and the resources available. She knew that the Korathians would adjust, that they would not be defeated easily. But Elira also knew the strength of her people, the loyalty and courage that flowed through them, and the determination that could not be crushed. Late that night, Elira walked along the palace balcony, looking out over the city. Fire still smoldered from the day's battles, but the streets were alive with activity. Soldiers repaired barricades, civilians aided in rebuilding efforts, and the air was filled with a sense of resilience. Elira's heart swelled with pride, not just for her victories but for the spirit of her people. A young messenger approached her, bowing respectfully. "Princess, reinforcements from the northern sector report heavy Korathian activity. They request guidance." Elira nodded. Prepare the troops. We will meet them head-on, but we will use the terrain. Divide their forces, confuse them, and strike where they are weakest. We have done this before, and we will do it again." Her orders were precise, her plan clear, and her confidence unwavering. Soldiers moved with purpose, inspired by her presence and her unshakable will. Elira had become more than a leader. She was a symbol of hope, courage, and resilience. As the twin moons of Varian rose, casting a silver glow across the valley, Elira prepared for the next battle. She knew the Korathians would come with greater force, but she also knew that her people would stand united. Every victory, every strategy, every act of bravery was a testament to their strength. The Korathians had expected a princess who would flee, a leader who would hide behind walls. Instead, they faced Elira Varian, a leader who would fight, who would inspire, and who would not rest until her people were safe. And as the first signs of the enemy's renewed assault appeared on the horizon, Elira smiled faintly. The war was far from over, but she had proven something essential. Courage, intelligence, and leadership could turn the tide against even the mightiest adversary. Varian was not just surviving, it was thriving under her command. And Elira knew that the greatest battles were still ahead, but she was ready. For the princess who had chosen war instead of surrender, the fight was not just a matter of survival. It was a declaration that Varian would never bow, never yield, and never forget the strength of its people. The Korathians would soon realize that they were facing not just a princess, but a strategist, a warrior, and a symbol of hope that could not be extinguished. The valley was silent before the storm of battle. Elira stood on the balcony of the palace, her violet eyes scanning the horizon. Fires from previous attacks had burned themselves out, leaving charred ruins, but the air vibrated with tension. The Korathians were regrouping, their forces stronger than ever, with reinforcements arriving from distant star systems. This would be the decisive battle, one that would determine the fate of Varian. Elira's heart beat steadily, but inside she felt the weight of responsibility. The lives of every soldier, every civilian, rested upon her decisions. She did not fear death, but she feared failure, and failure was not an option. The war room was filled with maps, hollow projections, and the commanders of Varian's forces. Elira had spent countless hours preparing for this moment. "Today, we do not merely defend," she said, her voice steady and commanding. "Today we strike. We show the Korathians that Varian does not surrender and that no army, no matter how vast, can break the will of our people." Corvin, the seasoned general, nodded with respect. "Princess, your strategy has carried us this far, but the enemy is relentless. Are we prepared to face the full might of their fleet?" Elira's eyes were steady. "Preparedness is not measured by numbers, but by courage, coordination, and resolve. And our people have all three. We fight together and we fight to win." She moved among the soldiers, inspecting armor, checking supplies, and offering encouragement. Her presence alone was a rallying point. Even the youngest recruits, who had barely survived the previous battles, stood taller, inspired by her courage and unwavering determination. The first signs of the enemy appeared at dawn. Korathian warships darkened the sky, their massive frames casting shadows over the valley. The sound of engines and weapons filled the air. Elira's forces took their positions, ready to execute the plan she had crafted with meticulous care. The strategy was bold. Varian's forces would lure the Korathians into a series of narrow passes, where the enemy's superior numbers would be a disadvantage rather than a strength. Hidden artillery, energy traps, and elite strike teams lay in wait, ready to turn the battlefield into a maze of destruction for the invaders. As the Korathians advanced, Elira rode to the front lines on her hoverbike. Her cape flowed behind her as she raised the royal standard high, signaling the beginning of the battle. Soldiers cheered, their morale soaring. They had seen their princess fight beside them before, and now they would do so again, inspired by her bravery and intelligence. The first clashes were fierce. Energy bolts streaked across the sky, explosions shook the ground, and the air was filled with the roar of combat. Elira moved among her troops, directing movements, coordinating attacks, and ensuring that every unit was in position. Her decisions were instantaneous, each one maximizing the effectiveness of her smaller but more agile army. In the narrow passes, Korathian tanks and infantry advanced, expecting an easy march. Instead, they were met with devastating ambushes. Mines exploded beneath their feet, energy barricades forced them into kill zones, and Varian's archers and rifle squads struck from above. Chaos erupted among the enemy ranks, their confidence faltering under the precision and coordination of Elira's forces. Elira led a strike team to disable the enemy's central artillery, a move that could turn the tide of the battle. She and her team navigated through dense forests and rocky terrain, avoiding detection until the perfect moment to strike. When they reached the artillery positions, Elira gave the signal. Explosions rocked the battlefield, destroying the heavy weapons and forcing the Korathians to retreat. Meanwhile, Elira's main forces continued to fight with strategy and skill. She directed reinforcements to critical points, reinforcing defenses and exploiting weaknesses in the enemy formation. Every maneuver was precise, calculated, and executed with flawless timing. Soldiers followed her commands instinctively, their confidence growing with every successful strike. The Korathian commander, observing from his flagship, grew frustrated. "The princess is more than clever, she is dangerous," he muttered. "Send in everything. Leave nothing behind, crush them all." But Elira was ready. She had anticipated this escalation. Additional traps, concealed artillery, and elite squads were deployed to counter the enemy's overwhelming force. The battlefield became a complex puzzle, and Elira's mind worked faster than any machine, orchestrating every movement with perfect precision. Hours passed, and the tide of the battle began to shift decisively. The Korathians, confident in their numerical superiority, were disoriented and struggling to adapt. Elira's strategies exploited every weakness, and her people fought with unmatched courage. Soldiers who had once feared defeat now pressed forward, inspired by the princess who refused to yield. In the midst of the chaos, Elira spotted a group of enemy commanders attempting to regroup and coordinate a counterattack. Without hesitation, she led a rapid strike force to intercept them. The skirmish was intense, energy bolts and plasma weapons clashing in sparks of light. Elira moved with unmatched agility and skill, striking decisively while ensuring her forces maintained cohesion. The enemy leaders were neutralized, and the Korathian counterattack collapsed. By nightfall, the battlefield was littered with the remnants of the enemy forces. The Korathians had suffered significant losses and were retreating in disarray. Elira's forces, though exhausted and battered, remained standing, victorious. Soldiers cheered, civilians emerged from hiding, and the fires of resistance burned brighter than ever. Elira returned to the palace, her mind already planning for the next steps. The victory was significant, but the war was not over. She convened her commanders and addressed them with calm authority. "Today, we have proven our strength and resilience, but the Korathians will return. We must continue to prepare, to train, and to innovate. Our people have seen what courage can achieve. Let this be the beginning of a legend that will be remembered for generations." Corvan, his respect for Elira now complete, spoke. "Princess, you have done more than lead us to victory. You have shown us what it means to be Varian. Your courage, wisdom, and strength have inspired every soul in this city." Elira nodded, a faint smile on her face. "We fight not for glory but for survival and honor. Our people have endured, our spirit is unbroken, and our determination will not falter. Varian stands united, and we will continue to rise above any challenge." In the days that followed, Elira led her people in rebuilding the city, strengthening defenses, and preparing for any future attacks. Her leadership had transformed the morale of Varian citizens. Soldiers trained harder, civilians worked with renewed purpose, and the unity of the city grew stronger than ever. Elira had not only defended her people, but had instilled a sense of pride, resilience, and hope that would endure beyond the war. Word of her bravery and strategic genius spread across neighboring star systems. Tales of the princess who refused to flee and led her people to victory inspired admiration and respect. Elira's name became synonymous with courage, leadership, and the indomitable spirit of Varian. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the horizon, Elira stood once again on the palace balcony. The city below was alive, filled with the sounds of rebuilding and the quiet hum of life returning. She watched as soldiers trained, citizens worked, and the streets of Varian thrived despite the scars of battle. A young messenger approached her, bowing. "Princess, scouts report that the Korathians have retreated far beyond the borders. They do not dare to attack again for now." Elira's eyes reflected the soft light of the moons. "For now," she said softly, "but we remain vigilant. We prepare, we train, and we ensure that Varian will never be caught unready again." She turned her gaze to the horizon, where the first signs of dawn colored the sky in shades of gold and orange. The battle had been won, but the war had taught her people a vital lesson. Courage, leadership, and unity could overcome even the greatest of threats. Elira had chosen war instead of surrender, and through that choice, she had transformed her people. They were no longer a realm waiting to be conquered. They were warriors, leaders, and survivors. The galaxy had seen Varian's strength, and they would never underestimate it again. As the sun rose, Elira felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had honored her people, defended her home, and proven that true leadership meant standing tall even when the odds seemed impossible. The future was uncertain, and challenges would come again, but Varian was ready. Its people were united, and its princess had shown the way. And Elira Varian, the alien princess who had refused to run, had carved her name into the history of her world, not as a figurehead, but as a true leader, a strategist, and a warrior whose courage would inspire generations to come. The war had tested them, but Varian had emerged stronger, braver, and united. And Elira knew that as long as she stood with her people, they could face anything that the galaxy sent their way. For the princess who chose war instead of surrender, victory was not just survival. It was the enduring legacy of courage, unity, and the indomitable spirit of Varian. They expected the alien princess to run, but she chose war instead.